You're adopted. You don't deserve a dime. Those were the exact words my father spat at me across the dining room table, his eyes cold like I'd never mattered. My mother looked away. My younger brother, smirking, held the deed in his hands like it already belonged to him. I'd spent my entire life believing I was loved, cherished, part of this family. But the moment they read Grandpa's will, everything changed. They cast me out, told me I was just a legal technicality, and that blood stays, papers don't. What they didn't know, the house they were fighting over was already mine. If this story moves, you don't forget to comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more true stories that hit the heart and heal the soul. My name is Penelope, and I'm a 28-year-old attorney. I specialize in estate law, which is ironic, considering my own family treated me like I had no place in theirs. I grew up in a modest but loving home, or so I thought. My parents adopted me when I was just a baby, and they always told me I was chosen, special, wanted. I believed them. I believed everything. They supported me through law school, cheered when I passed the bar, and even asked for my help managing paperwork when my mom got sick years ago. So when Grandpa passed away and left his estate to be divided, I assumed they'd be fair. That blood wouldn't matter more than love. But I was wrong, because when the will was read and it was clear I wasn't named, they didn't just let it go. They told me I had no claim, that I was nothing. They erased me. What they didn't count on, though, was that I had documents they forgot, documents I helped draft 6 years ago when they needed a legal loophole. Before I could fight back, I had to relive everything, the memories, the cracks, and the signs I ignored. I used to think love was enough, that if you worked hard, respected, your parents got good grades, and followed the rules, you'd be accepted, truly unconditionally accepted. But that illusion started to crack long before the will reading. I just didn't want to see it. I remember being 12 and hearing my mom whisper to her sister on the phone, "She's smart, but she's not like Nathan. He has our blood." At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself she didn't mean it, that maybe I'd misheard. But I hadn't. Nathan, my younger brother by 2 years, always got the benefit of the doubt. When he crashed Dad's car, it was boys will be boys. When I missed curfew by 5 minutes, I was disrespectful. He was praised for C's. I brought home straight A's and was told not to brag. By high school, I knew I was different in their eyes. I had to be perfect to earn what he received by default. I paid for my own SAT tutoring by babysitting on weekends. I earned scholarships. Nathan didn't even apply to college yet. They bought him a brand new car to help him find his path. And still, I stayed. I told myself that families are complicated, that maybe it would change once I became successful. I got into law school on a full ride. I worked 3 part-time jobs while attending classes full-time. I didn't ask them for a cent. And when I passed the bar on my first try, they said, "You're doing well, that's good. No pride, no hug. Just a nod like they were waiting for me to mess up." I visited every holiday, brought gifts, helped them file taxes, took care of Mom when she got diagnosed with cancer. I was the one who read through hospital paperwork, found her the best treatment options, and sat with her during chemo when Nathan couldn't deal with it emotionally. It was during that time when finances got tight that my parents asked for a legal favor. They wanted to transfer the deed of their home temporarily to me to avoid a massive tax burden related to my mother's treatment plan. Just on paper, Dad said, "You're the lawyer after all." I reviewed everything, made sure it was legal, clean, and recorded. I kept copies, of course. It was my name on the deed, but at the time I didn't think of it as mine. I was just trying to help. Funny how loyalty makes you blind. I started noticing it more clearly once Nathan moved back home in his mid-20s. He'd never held a job for more than 6 months, but they treated him like royalty. He got the master bedroom, Mom cooked for him, Dad introduced him as our son, and referred to me when he did as the lawyer. And then, one night over dinner, Dad made a joke. "If anything ever happens to us, Nathan knows how to handle the house." Right, son. He didn't even glance at me. A chill ran down my spine. Still, I didn't want to confront them. I didn't want to believe that the people I called family saw me as a placeholder, useful but disposable. But after Grandpa passed away, and his will was read, the truth hit like a freight train. Grandpa had left everything to my dad. I expected my parents to share fairly with both of us, But instead, they called a family meeting where I was told in no uncertain terms that I was not entitled to a penny. "It's nothing personal," Dad said, "but Nathan is our real son." Then Mom added quietly, "It just makes more sense this way." They handed Nathan the keys, the paperwork, and told me I should understand my place. Understand my place. I left the house in a daze, fighting back tears, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Not because I wanted the money, but because I finally saw myself through their eyes. Not as a daughter, but as a tool, a stopgap, a convenience. The next morning, I pulled out the deed from my files, the one with my name on it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to use the law not to help them, but to protect myself. They thought I'd walk away quietly, but I was done being silent. It was time to speak in the only language they truly respected: the law. From the moment I stepped into the courtroom, I knew this was more than just a legal battle. It was my chance to prove something far bigger: my worth, my identity, and the truth that blood wasn't the only thing that defined family. I had spent years building my career as a lawyer, quietly gathering every piece of evidence that would show the court the truth behind the so-called family I had grown up in. What they never expected was how well prepared I was, how deeply I understood the system they used to exclude me. The house that my mother and father tried to erase me from was actually already mine, legally transferred into my name 6 years ago under a tax arrangement while my mother was battling illness. That document was my ace in the hole. It wasn't something they had forgotten, but something they had hoped I would never uncover or dare to use. The day I presented the deed in court was the day everything shifted. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as my lawyer slid the papers across the bench. Their faces, my parents' and Nathan's, twisted in shock and fury. For years, they had claimed I was nothing more than an outsider, undeserving of even a penny. Now that claim was crumbling right before their eyes. But the twist that no one saw coming wasn't just the deed. During the proceedings, my attorney revealed a series of emails and texts between Nathan and a real estate agent, exchanges that showed they were trying to secretly sell parts of the property without my consent, betraying even their own code of family loyalty. That revelation threw my parents into chaos. They had lied, schemed, and planned behind my back, thinking I was powerless. But instead, the court saw the real story: a family fractured by greed, betrayal, and hypocrisy. Throughout the trial, the emotional toll was heavy. I saw flashes of the little girl I once was, hoping for love, desperate to belong. But I was also the woman I had become: calm, poised, and unwavering. The most painful moment came when my father tried to justify his actions, saying, "She's not really our daughter. She doesn't belong here." But the judge didn't hesitate. The legal documents spoke louder than his words, and the law recognized me as the rightful owner. I thought Nathan would crumble under the pressure, but he doubled down on his venom. His smirks during the hearing were like knives trying to cut through my resolve, but every barb he threw only made me stronger. I knew this fight was never really about the house. It was about proving that I was worthy, that I deserved respect and justice. The turning point came on the last day of the trial. When the judge announced the verdict, I was the legal owner of the house. My parents and Nathan had no claim. They were ordered to vacate within 30 days. The courtroom erupted in whispers and stunned silence. I felt an overwhelming wave of relief and vindication, but also sadness, because this wasn't just a legal win. It was a painful reminder of how little family had meant to them. Yet amid all this turmoil, there was a strange sense of justice. The very system they had tried to use to exclude me was now the tool of my empowerment. I had let the deed speak louder than their words. I had let the law validate what they had tried to deny. But the story didn't end there. Weeks after the trial, an unexpected call came. It was from my old high school history teacher, Mrs. Jennings, someone who had always seen my potential even when my family dismissed me. She told me about a scholarship program for young lawyers who wanted to use their skills to help marginalized communities. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been searching for: a way to turn my personal battle into something bigger. With renewed purpose, I applied and was accepted. The program would fund a legal aid clinic that focused on adoption rights and discrimination cases. Suddenly, the house that had been a battleground became a symbol of hope. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same home that had been used as a weapon to cut me out of my family now became the foundation of my mission to fight for those like me, those who had been written off because of circumstances beyond their control. And Nathan, he tried to interfere again, threatening legal action and making public accusations. But by then, I was ready. Every threat was met with calm, every attack countered with evidence. The final twist. One of Nathan's own friends turned witness in my favor, revealing his own doubts about Nathan's integrity. Justice was no longer just a word, it was a reality I had carved out with my own hands. But as the courtroom doors closed behind me, I knew this victory was just the beginning. The real battle, the emotional one, was still waiting. It wasn't the lawsuit itself that broke me. I'd filed countless civil cases for clients. I knew the ropes, the language, the timelines. I filed my petition calmly citing the legal transfer of the deed from 6 years prior, ironclad signed and notarized. But it was the way my parents responded. That nearly shattered me. They didn't just deny it. They called me a fraud. They hired an outside attorney, a sleazy, loud man named Gregory Dorsey, who was infamous in our town for taking on family drama cases. He stood in court and claimed I had manipulated my sick mother into signing away her house, that I took advantage of their trust while she was undergoing chemotherapy. My mother, the woman I sat beside for weeks, with soup and books and blankets, nodded as he said it. I couldn't breathe. I sat across the courtroom from them, my own mother and father, and watched as they painted me as some greedy parasite. Nathan was there too, smirking, like he had already won at arms crossed, looking like the hero who had saved the family from the evil adopted child. At one point, Gregory even tried to invalidate the deed by suggesting I had forged it. Forged. I stared at my parents, silently begging for one of them to speak up, to say no, she helped us, she saved us, but they didn't. My father just adjusted his tie and stared past me like I was a stranger. My mother refused to meet my eyes. And Nathan, he grinned like it was all some game. That night I sat in my apartment with every light off. I didn't cry. I just sat in the silence, numb. I thought about every holiday meal, every handmade birthday card, every late-night phone call where they told me I was their miracle. None of it had been real. Or maybe it was until I stopped being useful. I was shaking not from fear, but from rage. Rage that I had built my entire identity around pleasing people who saw me as nothing more than a placeholder. Rage that I had bent over backward to protect their legacy, their taxes, their comfort, while they plotted to erase mine. But the truth was on my side. I had the originals, the time-stamped documents, emails, scans, even the notary's records confirming my mother's presence and signature. It wasn't just legal, it was bulletproof. Still, the damage was emotional, not legal. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother nodding to that lawyer's lies. And then came the cross-examination. I had chosen to represent myself, not out of pride, but because I didn't trust anyone else to know the full story the way I did. When it was my turn to take the stand, I didn't hold back. I told the court everything from the adoption papers and my upbringing to the request to temporarily transfer the deed. I presented every receipt, every message. But what broke the room open was a voice memo, one I had completely forgotten about. 6 years ago, when my mom had been undergoing chemo, she was too weak to write, so she'd asked me to record her instructions on my phone. One of those memos was her explaining the deed transfer. "Thank you, Penelope. This helps us so much. You're the only one we can trust with this." When I played it in court, there was silence. My mother froze. Nathan stiffened. And my father finally looked at me, not with love, but with fear. They had backed themselves into a corner so deep they forgot the one person they were up against had built her life in the walls of this very system. And now the system was listening. The judge took everything under advisement. But I knew then we'd won. Outside the courthouse, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pride. I felt empty, like I had just buried something. Not a case, but the last thread of hope that they'd ever love me for who I was. 2 days later, the verdict came. The house was mine. The documents were valid. The court ordered my parents and Nathan to vacate the property within 30 days. When I walked up the driveway that weekend to inspect the home, Nathan was packing a U-Haul. He didn't say a word. My dad didn't come outside. And my mom, she stood on the porch for a second, met my eyes, and looked away. I should have felt vindicated, powerful. But all I could think was, this is what they chose. This is what blood meant to them. I stood in the foyer of that house for nearly an hour, touching the walls, the staircase, the kitchen counter where we used to bake cookies together. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a graveyard of what used to be love. And that's when I knew I couldn't keep it. Not like this, not for me, not for. So I made a decision, not out of revenge, but out of purpose. If I couldn't have their love, I would give love to those who needed it most. I didn't go back to work right away. After the verdict, I took a week off and stayed in the old house. It was quiet now, strangely peaceful, like the air itself was trying to breathe again after years of tension. I slept in my old room. I opened drawers full of childhood sketches and dusty photo albums. I found a letter I'd written to Santa when I was 8, asking not for toys, but for my mom to get better and for Nathan to stop calling me a charity case. It hit harder now. I kept waiting for the sense of triumph to come. It didn't. What came instead was clarity. I realized I had spent most of my life chasing the approval of people who saw me as conditionally worthy. My achievements, my degrees, even my career had been born from a hunger to prove I belonged to this family, to this name, to this bloodline that was never mine. But in this empty house, I understood something for the first time. I didn't need to belong to them. I belonged to the truth I stood for. And truth didn't care about DNA. I remember walking to the backyard one morning, coffee in hand, barefoot on the grass, still wet with dew. That's when I saw her, Mrs. Alvarez, our old neighbor. She was hanging laundry just like she always used to. We hadn't spoken in years. When she noticed me, she smiled and waved. Then she walked over and gave me the longest, warmest hug. I watched the hearing, she said. They didn't deserve you. But the world still does. I cried. We sat on the back porch for almost an hour. She told me stories I'd forgotten, how I used to babysit her grandkids when they were in a pinch, how I'd help carry her groceries when my dad refused to help her after she lost her husband. You always had a strong heart, Penelope. You didn't get it from them. You built it. Her words struck a nerve I didn't know was still raw, because for the first time someone was telling me I was enough, not because I belonged, but because I showed up. That conversation planted the seed. What if this house didn't have to be a symbol of pain? What if I could rewrite its purpose? I spent the next few days digging into my finances, reviewing zoning laws, talking to realtors and nonprofits. And then I called an architect. I want to turn this place into something that helps people, I told him. Specifically, kids like me. Kids who've been tossed aside because they don't share someone's blood type. He nodded. You thinking shelter or office? I smiled. Both. It started coming together fast after that. I turned the upstairs bedrooms into small consultation rooms. The dining room became a library and reading nook. The garage a communal legal aid center. I used my own savings to fund the renovation and applied for nonprofit status under the name the Alma House. Alma Latin for soul. Because here it wouldn't be blood that mattered. It would be spirit, kindness, and justice. Word spread quickly. Within months, we had a waiting list of families needing help with adoption conflicts, undocumented children needing legal aid, foster youth fighting for basic rights. I took on pro bono cases, mentored law students, and trained new attorneys in trauma-informed care. I even got letters from kids thanking me. One wrote, I didn't think I mattered because I wasn't real family. You made me feel like I was. Every day I walked into Alma House, I felt like I was stitching something back together inside me. I didn't erase my pain. I used it. I turned betrayal into blueprint, grief into mission, and loneliness into a home. I still thought about my parents sometimes, and Nathan. I'd wonder if they regretted anything, but I never reached out. Forgiveness didn't mean reunion. It meant peace. And I had it now. One evening as I locked up for the night, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Tired eyes, worn blazer, calloused hands. But there was strength, too. Not the kind they tried to strip from me in court, but the kind that rises when no one claps, when no one sees, when you keep standing anyway. That was the moment I realized I didn't win despite being adopted. I won because I knew how to survive rejection. And survival taught me how to lead. But victory always echoes, and mine was about to reach the very people who once cast me out. It started with a letter, a thick white envelope bearing the family name Reynolds, delivered to the last known address of my adoptive parents. Inside was a formal notice. They had 30 days to vacate the property. The court had ruled decisively in my favor. They lost the appeal. There were no more delays, no more tricks. The home they once tried to erase me from was now legally and irrevocably mine. When the eviction date arrived, I didn't show up in person. I didn't need to. But I did receive photos from the sheriff's office boxes lining the driveway, Nathan yelling at the movers, my father red-faced, pacing in disbelief. My mother sat on the porch steps, head in hands. For a brief moment, I felt something flicker inside me. Grief. Remorse, no. It was release. They had mocked my adoption, dismissed my existence, used me for their own convenience, and discarded me when I no longer served their purpose. They thought I would disappear quietly. Instead, I rebuilt the system they tried to weaponize, and I used it to draw the line. Not in rage, but in justice. A few weeks later, a young woman knocked on Alma House's front door. She was 18, just aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. I welcomed her in, gave her a warm meal, a legal intake form, and something my own family never gave me: dignity. As I showed her to her temporary room, she paused at the staircase and looked around. "This place feels safe," she whispered. I smiled. That's the point. What my adoptive family built on exclusion, I transformed with inclusion. And every step they took to cast me out only made my foundation stronger. But there's one final piece to this story, one last truth I need to share before I close this chapter for good. After everything, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the years of pain, I finally found peace. Not because I got the house back or won the case, but because I claimed my worth on my own terms. Blood may connect us, but it doesn't define us. Family isn't just about DNA. It's about respect, love, and standing up for yourself when others refuse to see your value. I learned to set boundaries and protect my spirit. I stopped letting their rejection shape who I was. Instead, I chose to build a life filled with purpose and compassion, using my own story to help others who felt invisible or unloved. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this: your worth is never determined by others' opinions or prejudices. Stand firm, fight for your place, and never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touched you, please like, share, or comment below. And if you've ever faced rejection or betrayal, I'd love to hear your story too. Remember, your true family is the one you choose and the love you give yourself. Would you like me to help with the final full script assembly or any other part next?